know I got this Q50 set up right now, or getting set up right, and man, she looks good. But there is not a single day that goes by that I don't regret selling the BMW 335i, just a little bit. It really put a lot of time and energy into getting that car situated and sorted and running properly, and I really grew to love it. And it was just a short period of time that I had it, and I let it go on a whim, thinking that I was going to jump right into another project, and it didn't happen. And now, as I've had time to sit back and reflect on that car a little bit, I really liked it. And I have to admit that as I search for a second channel car, I'd be lying to you if I said I wasn't looking at 335s again. The reason for this video is I'm sure that many of you are in the same situation. You're searching for a BMW 335i, and you're kind of curious as to what to look out for making your selection. I don't blame you one single bit for looking at a 335i as a potential project car, because the price points of them at this point are really reasonable, really nice. There's a lot of them out there to look at, and the potential for power is so great. Now, we also have to keep in mind that we're talking about a BMW, and we're talking about an N54 specifically. So we know that there is high potential for problems. Now let's just stop the jibber jabber and cut to the chase, why don't we? Now, this is what I'm going to suggest that you look out for as you shop for a BMW 335i, because this is what I'm going to look for when I shop for a BMW 335i. To keep it simple, I'm going to break it down as if I was walking up to a car and looking at it. There's let's just say 3 main areas to focus on. A couple of red flags right out of the box that I'll be sure to mention. So right off the rip, we're walking up to the car. Forget everything that you saw in the pictures. Forget about whatever the seller told you. We got to get our eyeballs on this thing. So you're walking up to the car, take a look at the paint, take a look at the wheels and tires, and just make a visual assessment. There's a lot of door dings, a lot of dents, a lot of damage. The wheels are all scuffed up. The car probably hasn't been taken care of. Now, paint fade is a different thing. Clear coat failure, that's a different thing. Especially if you're in the southern states, there's potential for the clear coat to be kind of failing on the hood, the deck lid, the roof. That doesn't necessarily mean it wasn't taken care of. It may have spent a lot of time outside, but that doesn't really weigh that much into performance of the vehicle. There's things that can be done. You can wrap your roof, you can repaint the parts. Don't worry about that so much. The door dings, the curb rash, the mismatched tires, those are red flags. Now open the door, take a look inside. This is one thing that I really pay attention to. Interior. This goes back to assessing whether or not the car has been taken care of. Now, there can be some wearing on the steering wheel. There can be some normal wear and tear on the seats. That's not necessarily that big of a deal. I mean, we're looking at a car that's 10, 12, 13 years old at this point, right? So you have to have reasonable expectations. But if there's big stains on the carpets, if the dash is all tore up or messed up, if there's, crap, gunk and gum and grime and crap and coffee and shit spilled into the cup holders and around the shifter, red flags. Ding, ding, ding. Red flags. If they haven't taken care of the interior of the vehicle, the chances that they've taken care of the car in general are pretty slim. If everything looks good, proceed with the assessment. If the exterior is giving you red flags and the interior have given you red flags, I maybe pump the brakes a little bit. Now, before even starting the car, pop the hood and take a look in the engine bay. Now, if you're at a dealership, they probably have put a bunch of tire shine and shit and, engine dressing all over the place. So all the plastics are looking nice and shiny and black. Don't let it deceive you. Take the engine cover off if you can. Otherwise, try to look in all the nooks and crannies and crevices for any major leaks. We know that the N54 was prone to valve cover gasket leaking. It's hard to see from above, especially if the engine cover is on. Again, take that engine cover off if possible. But look down alongside the engine. It kind of tilts like this. Look on the lower side, the same side as the fuel injectors and the spark plugs are on. Look down there, see if you can get a light shined into where the spark plugs are, and look for any oil residue. Sometimes that gasket will leak and it'll kind of drip some oil down, especially back toward the number 5 and number 6 cylinders. And see if you can see any oil residue. We know that the oil filter housing gasket leaks as well. A lot of times you'll be able to see if the leak is real bad, that oil residue and crap leaking down the front of the engine. that's a serious issue. It can saturate your belts, causing the belts to fail and actually get sucked up into your engine. No bueno. Not good at all. Now, it also can be tricky and sneaky. If the leak is not bad but still present, it may be leaking on the backside. So again, see if you can get some light shined back there behind the oil filter housing gasket and to see if you can see any residue. These aren't necessarily big issues, and you can take care of them yourself. It's very doable, but it's time consuming. If you've never worked on a BMW before, if you've never worked on a car before, it can be a little intimidating and a little difficult. If you have a shop do it, it's going to cost you a pretty good chunk of change. So just be prepared. It's not necessarily a red flag because it's common. It's a common issue on this platform, but it's something to consider going forward in making an offer on the car and knowing what you're going to get yourself into. Try to get underneath the car as well, because another common leak point is the oil pan gasket. That's another fun job to do on your own. And of course, I'm being sarcastic. And while you have the hood open, if you're able to take that engine cover off, get a light in there, shine on the injectors, and get a look at what index they are. If they're index 12s, they've been updated. They're probably okay. If they say anything below 12, be prepared to swap injectors. If you have all index 1 injectors, all index 8 injectors, you can't just swap one for an index 12. You got to redo them all if one needs them. So just be prepared. I mentioned injectors because they're expensive, like $1,200, $1,300, $1,400 if you get them new. So that's just another thing to pay attention to. If they're index 1, you might be okay. If they're anything other than index 12s, you're probably going to have to replace them because they just were not very good. And number 12s, if they're all index 12, you're probably good to go. It's the latest revision as far as I know, and they're pretty solid injectors, so good. If you have trouble getting the engine cover off, or you're not able to, or whatever the case may be, you're not able to get under the car, I would say pre-purchase inspection is probably number one thing you need to do with this car anyway. Get it to a reputable shop, or a shop that's specifically familiar with BMWs, and have them take a look at it. That's going to give you a lot of information on whether or not the car is a good choice to purchase or not. If you're not able to do, or you don't want to go through the hassle of a pre-purchase inspection, ask for service records. Even a detailed Carfax can give you a lot of information. It can tell you about some major repairs. It can tell you if the valve cover gasket had been changed. For example, my 335 that I had purchased, I didn't get a pre-purchase inspection. I got a post-purchase inspection, but I kind of knew what I was getting into, right? But it did have a Carfax that gave me a lot of information, which was satisfying. It was sufficient for my needs. It told me that the oil pan gasket had been changed like 20,000 miles prior to my purchase. It told me that the valve cover gasket had been changed maybe 30 or 40,000 miles prior to my purchasing. I think I mentioned something about steering rack being replaced, and there was a bunch of other, kind of major repairs. But knowing I didn't have to change the valve cover gasket, knowing I didn't have to get under the car and change the oil pan gasket, those were big to me. And that was kind of, those are some of the reasons I was able to make the decision to move forward with that car. And finally, get in, start that sucker up, and get a feel for how it runs. Now, the N54 can be a little bit deceiving. When you fire it up, it might fire up just fine. No sign of hesitation, no sign of misfire. It might idle smooth. And it might even run okay as you drive it around the block and up and down the road a little bit. But these N54s will develop their misfire after they get hot. I guess the way they're set up is that I can't remember if downstream, I think it's the downstream O2 sensor doesn't start sending signal to the computer until it's at operating temperature. So it just kind of has this generic parameters at startup and idle while it's warming up, and it can be deceiving because the car will run fine. But as soon as it gets hot or up to operating temperature, that's when the O2 sensor starts sending signal, and the car might not like those parameters, or maybe the O2 sensor is not functioning, and that's kind of what I'm getting at. Again, this is a job you can handle on your own, but it's just more things to diagnose because misfires can be caused by so many damn things on this platform. You could have leaking injectors, and that's another reason I tell you to check the index on the injectors. If it's leaking, it could cause a misfire, it can cause a weird idle, it can cause smoke out the tailpipes. Check out my other videos about signs of failing injectors, so we don't have to get into that here. But there's just a lot to it. So when I say start the car, don't just start it and let it idle. Don't let the person dictate how long you can drive it for. You know, take them with you if they want, but make sure you get that thing out on the highway. Make sure you get it out around town and get it nice and hot to make sure everything is at operating temperature and you're getting true readings. Just real quick, speaking of leaking injectors, when you start the car up, have somebody, your wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, you know, son or daughter, whoever, stand behind the car, or have them start it for you and watch. Is there smoke coming out of the tailpipes? Is it dark smoke or white smoke? In my case, which was a sign of failing injector, those leaking injectors, while the car sits for long periods of times, can just drip fuel down into the cylinders, and that unburnt fuel sort of makes its way, or the car is not necessarily, you know, able to burn all that fuel off, so it can manifest in smoke out the tailpipe. Some have experienced dark colored smoke. Some have experienced white smoke like myself. It can idle a little bit rough and then kind of settle down as it burns some of that excess fuel off. But again, it might not necessarily clear up all the misfires because the O2 sensors aren't working. So, or it needs spark plugs. These things burn through spark plugs like crazy, especially if you have leaking injectors. It might be fouling out your plugs. So there's just so much to watch out for. And I don't mean to scare you off of the N54 because I love that platform. It's so amazing. It sounds great. When they're running right, they run so good. BMW obviously makes a nice interior, especially in those older cars. Oh man, I love the E92, the E90X interior. So nice. Another thing I want to mention when you fire up the car is listen for wastegate rattle. It's just another thing to pay attention to, and another sign that your turbos might not be in the best shape. You can hear in this clip as he fires it up, you can hear that tinny kind of rattling noise. It's a sign of wastegate rattle. You might not hear it on idle, but if you rev the car, you can hear it kind of sounds like washers in a coffee can. Just listen for that sound. And more, we're talking about condition of turbos. Another thing to pay attention to is smoke out the tailpipes, because you might have failing turbos as well. Oh my gosh, so much to think about. So please pursue a 335i. Pursue the N54. It's an awesome platform. I love it, but just know what you're getting into. Just really doing your due diligence in terms of the seller and, you know, the car's history. Try to get as much information as you possibly can to paint a complete picture of the car's life, so you know what you're getting into, because it could be a serious headache. I hope this video wasn't too long, guys, but I hope it was helpful as you dive into this BMW 335i N54 realm. If you get into these types of projects, I hope it is beneficial in your search. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below. I'll try to help you out as best I can based on my experience searching and working on that platform. And check out my other BMW related videos as well. I have a few of them out there, and I hope to make more, maybe. We'll see. But thank you guys very much for watching. I appreciate you giving the video a thumbs up and also hitting that subscribe button below. I appreciate the continued support for everybody, all of you guys that have been supporting me along the way and just stopped in on this BMW video just to support the channel. I appreciate it very much. We'll see you in the next one.